Well, just kind of cruised through Rapid City, but love the fact that they had a bunch of streets named after saints. St. James, St. Charles, St. Andrew. So that was pretty cool. Like Rapid City. Alright, we're in Sturgis. Check out the motorcycle museum. Grab a burger.
In 1,000 feet, you will arrive at your destination.
Well, we're in Sturgis. Didn't drive in on the motorcycle, but had a motorcycle. So we'll get some lunch here and maybe check out the motorcycle museum. So check out the old town Sturgis. Gotta go into the Harley shop while we're here. When you're in Sturgis, you gotta have a Harley hat. So, picked up a Harley hat and a cool shirt, Harley shirt. So, drop these off in the truck and go to the museum.
What happened with that?
No, it's not. It's a race. It's a race.
Well, maybe downstairs.
I think it's the most famous motorcycle race in the world.
I don't think they have motorcycle races.
Yeah, but I think
No.
it's just very close.
They're almost.
Can I go around?
No.
I'm several seconds.
Really? No, do it once.
Okay, once. It's not good. It's not hard.
Carrier task forces during strikes in the Western Pacific. The invasions of Leyte, Luzon, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa were among the operations that she participated in. She was also present in Tokyo Bay on September 2nd, 1945, for Japan's formal surrender. Her actions were reported in newspapers, magazines, and on the radio as the deeds of Battleship X, or Old Nameless, because the Navy wanted to hide information about the battleship from our enemies. USS South Dakota was decommissioned in January 1947. She was inactive until October 1962, when she was sold for scrap metal. But 1 month.
Daytona Speed, 1992. 1 year after vowing to return with a bike of his own creation, John Britt was back with a motorcycle like no other.
What color?
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. I direct your attention to the book as towards the colors and commission pen. South Dakota, attend up.
Yes. So the old motorcycle, see these guys racing? This is my helmet, that one right there.
good burgers, good service. So got here just in time for the last tour at 4 o'clock. The Adams house, Victorian house. And apparently the widow of this house when her husband passed away, she was too distraught to come back to the home, so it sat exactly like it was for 50 years until she passed away. And so we'll find out more about it, but there's even a cookie jar with the, I don't know, maybe the cookies are still there, I'm not sure. But it's pretty cool. All the furniture was just left as is. She never came back to the house. She couldn't handle it emotionally. So. We'll go to the Mount Moriah Cemetery after this tour of the house. Beautiful fence.
As I had said outside, today we are going to be talking about 3 significant families that used to live here. And really not just what their contribution was to this home, but to the entire city of Deborah as well. Now, given this quick timeline, a look right before I do start, it's going to help with the stories a lot better today, just because it does get a little long.
Yeah.
Now, while we are looking at this timeline as well, you can notice that the Adams were not the first owners of our home. And really the reason why we do call this their home, though, is because they were the most recent people to live here, and most of the materials inside of the home also did belong to them.
I see.
Now, the first family that we actually are going to be talking about today were known as the Franklins.
Okay.
More specifically, though, Harris and Anna Franklin. Now, Harris and Anna Franklin were both Jewish immigrants. And really their story here in our country is also kind of one of our own significance. The two of them had came over, they'd worked hard, and as you can probably tell by the home, had met some pretty great success on the way.
Yeah.
Now, the two of them had actually both been born in 1849 in Germany. They actually were born during the same week of each other. However, they didn't actually meet until they were both living in Iowa. Yeah.
Wow.
That is where they had gotten married and had their first and only son, Nathan. Now, shortly after their son Nathan was born, though, that is when the family moved into Nebraska. In the early 1870s, they moved into Wyoming, and if you were living in Wyoming during that time, or, pretty much everywhere in that area, it was almost impossible not to see everyone talking and flooding towards the hills in search of the gold here. Cheap for this house. But in today's equivalency, that's actually still pretty cheap. In today's day, it would actually be now $250,000 to $300,000 in order to build this home.
Wow.
And, yeah.
That's not a bad price.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That had also, though, included the hot and cold running water, the radiator-generated heat, electrical lights, indoor plumbing, and servant call buttons in every single room by the light switch, like you see right over there.
Even that early they had that.
Yeah, all original from 1892.
Wow.
Now, when you would visit one of these families that used to live here, this room right here, it would most likely be the first room that you'd be welcomed into. Now, with inside of it, you're going to get the first notice of the 11-foot high walls, and that is not a wallpaper on them. It's actually Egyptian cotton canvas. And that hand-painted border at the top, that's actually still original from 1892.
Wow.
Now, all the oak woodwork and the trim that you're going to notice inside of our home today as well, this had came to our town by train from Nebraska. And this fireplace mantle as well, along with all the other ones in our house, those were all ordered out of the Sears Roebuck catalog. Seriously, yeah.
Yeah, I saw a house over in Keystone they ordered on Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah, they still have the Sears and Roebuck house over there.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to think about.
Crazy, yeah.
Now, the tiles right here, though, these are actually a very rare type of tile known as Maholica. But the simple aspect that does make them irreplaceable to this day are those bird-like designs you see around the fireplace itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when this family was designing the home in 1891, Anna Franklin, the wife of Harris, had actually drew those designs up herself.
Wow.
Yeah, she sent them into the Trent Tile Company of Trenton, New Jersey, and that is where they've been manufactured and transported from.
Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Is there any questions in here for you before we go on?
What would this room be called?
Kind of like the sitting room.
Sitting room.
In today's day, it'd be like basically the living room.
Okay.
But due to them having more opportunity, this was the lower sitting room.
Would that be the original fixture, light fixture? do you think?
No, that is not the original light fixture. However, are going to get an opportunity to see it because it's actually in the room right above it.
Oh, the one that was down here.
Yep, it's in the second floor now.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. Well, follow me over here. So this room right here is the parlor of the home, and as you can probably tell by my voice echoing through the room, it did have pretty good acoustics. It was also designed to have these though. This was the room where a lot of the events from the families were held, like small concerts, dinner parties, or even just big old card games. Now this piano right over here, this is actually one of the oldest instruments here in our town, still to this day.
Wow.
This piano had arrived here in Deadwood in 1878 by a wagon train from Chicago. And if you notice at the center right there, it says Line and Healy on it. That is actually still a piano production company in Chicago, still to this day as we speak.
Still making pianos.
Oh yeah, they've actually tried to reach out and buy this from us.
Oh,
But,
really?
you know, with it being such a very part of our history, we just couldn't sell it.
Yeah, it's priceless.
Yeah. Now, this right here, though, this is my favorite artifact inside of our home still to this day. Now, what this is a 1916 Victrola record player. And there's really two aspects about it, though, that make it so different from modern ones today. The first are the records themselves. Now, in 1916, these records were made out of shellac, not vinyl, and that made them a lot more high-end. But also, if you notice at the top right there, there's no needle a part of the player anymore either. And that's because in 1916, your needle was stainless steel and could only be used one time each. Yeah. After that first and initial use, the needle would become so dull that it actually scratch your record rather instead of playing it.
One record,
One
needle.
needle, one record, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, in 1902, that is the first time that the ownership of our house would switch. This room right here, this is known as the library of our home, and this is also where we're kind of considered to be the knowledge hub of our home as well. And it's really because of these books right here. Now, books on these shelves are over a century old, and some titles you probably still know. Little Women, Black Beauty, The Iliad by Homer, and the Family Collection of Shakespeare are all a part of these books right here. Now, in this room as well, this is where we really like to talk about the second owner of our home, Nathan Franklin. And this is kind of a better photograph for you of him. Now, in all honesty, this guy is really the one that makes the Franklin family name still so prominent in our community today. You know, he was a prominent business owner in town. He was the president of our First National Bank. He was the mayor for 3 terms. He was the president of our Humane Society for 15 years in town. And he also was the guy who the Franklin Hotel is named after. Yeah.
Wow.
So in 1899, due to him being the largest investor of the project, the people who owned it decided to name it after him. Yeah.
Very cool.
Now, his family, though, was just as prominent as he was around our community during these times. His wife, Ada, was actually from a pretty prominent family herself and was actually his high school sweetheart, too. And then this center photograph, this is a photograph of their daughter, Mildred. Now, not only was Mildred the family's first and only child, but she also was the first and only child to ever live inside of this home. She had moved in 1902 at the age of 10 years old. All right. Any questions in here for you?
So were these books from a variety of the families? Would
Yes,
you say?
correct. Yes.
Mhm.
So not all of them were owned by one specific family. These were definitely a collection of books that we found through the ownerships of every house. So, you know, some of the older ones might be owned by one of the Franklin families. Obviously, we know for sure that the history of the Adams family is owned by the Adams family.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Adams did have a weird asphyxiation where he wanted to believe that he was related to the Adams family presidential family.
Oh.
But
So he wrote a book?
no, he just was an avid reader. Like, he owned it. Like, you can see it right here. And this is actually by James Adams himself, which was Mr. Adams's relatives. Or not Mr. Adams, but like one of the President Adams's relatives.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Now, would this have been artwork from one of the families?
Yep, so this was actually owned by Mr. Adams. This is actually still a pretty popular piece of painting. You can actually Google this and you can find pictures of it where the colors are actually revamped and you can see how vibrant the painting actually was.
It might have faded.
Yeah,
in the
definitely
time.
have faded over the years.
Yeah. And they like to decorate the ceilings.
Yeah. So if you notice here, like some of the decals on the top wall, they have to do with like stuff with like study, you know, like literature, music. You have the knowledge lamp of the genie. Yeah.
You don't see many libraries and houses today.
No, you really don't.
Very new.
All right, so you can follow me over here. And behind this little door actually is where we're gonna find one of the first unique features of our home. It's actually a safe. Now, the reason why a safe was installed into the dining room, however, was really because of all that expensive china and silverware that used to fill this room as well. Just to kind of give you an example of how expensive this really could have gotten, this right here is an 18 karat gold charger plate. That plate's sole and only purpose was to be heated up, placed under your original plate, and to keep your food warm.
Wow.
That's about it, yeah. Now, all the china and silverware, though, that you do see on our table today, these are both a product of Heinrich & Company, which used to be open in Bavaria, Germany. If you do take a close look at all the pieces of silverware, you can actually notice that they have the engravings of WEA on them. And those were the initials of the third owner of our home, W.E. Adams. If you look closely enough, you know the salt and pepper shaker.
Third owner.
Uh-huh. All right, so in 1920, that is the next time that the ownership of our house would switch. And this time, it actually would switch over to the Adams.
Okay.
Now, in 1920, when Nathan Franklin had sold this house, he had moved his entire business and family out to New York City. And in 1925, his wife would pass away due to some natural causes, and he would join her 15 years later in 1940 after contracting a severe illness. But the really weird thing about his death, Nathan never actually died due to this illness. He died jumping to his suicide from the 3rd floor of the Mount Sinai Hospital there in New York City.
Wow.
Still to this day as well, we actually don't know what that illness was.
Some kind of mental illness.
Could have
no
been.
doubt.
Now, as for their daughter Mildred, though, she'd also went to New York City, and she kind of began to go through a rather rebellious stage against her parents. Thankfully got out of it. She went on to marry, though, a great American businessman by the name of Robert Gamble, kind of the co-founder of Procter & Gamble.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He had moved her down to Florida. That's where she spent the rest of her life, all the way up until her death in 1968.
Cool.
Now, with her death, however, that also was the end of the Franklin family line here in our country, because she never actually had any children of her own. This does also, though, bring us back to the third owners of our home, the Adams, who we're going to be talking about upstairs next.
Okay. And she died in what year, Mildred?
1968.
1968.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other questions in here, though?
Nope.
No? Okay. Follow me up the stairs next.
So they had a hot water boiler for heat?
Yep. We actually still use it today to heat up our house.
And is it coal-fired or the
It
boiler?
originally was, but nowadays, in 1925, Mr. Adams transitioned it into a natural gas boiler.
No, okay.
All right, so you can make your way into that room right there next.
Nice and cool in here.
Yeah. So this room right here is the original guest bedroom of our home. However, after a very large event that had affected the Adams family in 1925, this room was later remade into the master bedroom of the home. Also that same year is when that bathroom right over there was installed. That actually was an addition onto the home, like a lot of people would assume. That actually used to be the old sewing room for the maids.
Okay. And they converted it to a bathroom.
Yeah.
Would these be original fixtures when they did the
From
conversion?
the Adams family, yes.
So that'd be 1920s?
1925 specifically, actually. Yeah. Now, in this room as well, though, this is where we're going to be talking about the history of the Adams family here in Deadwood. And just like the Franklin family, their history here had also started in 1877. Now, in 1877, Mr. Adams and his older brother James arrived here in Deadwood to start a grocery store on Main Street. And actually, quite ironically enough, their business was just down the street from the Franklin family business.
Really?
Yeah. So with that also being said, though, their history here was pretty similar. Business burned down in 79.
Business owners. Yeah.
Adams decided to stay as well.
His business burnt down as well, the grocery store.
Oh yeah, 3/4 in the entire city that in one single night burned down. So it really affected everyone.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if they thought, how they build them stores right next to each other. It seems like they would have rethought that whole building process.
Right. With Deadwood being a mining town, and like especially a boom town, a lot of our structures in the early days were made solely out of wood just because people didn't understand how long they were actually going to be here. The way that the fire of 1879 actually happened was a bakery that was made out of wood, had an earthen oven in it, and the baker was making bread overnight in it. Well, the earthen oven had broke, started the bakery on fire, and right next to the bakery was the local ammunition depot.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it literally put fuel on the fire to the point where it was uncontrollable.
Did they have a fire department back in those days?
Unfortunately, no. There was actually no repercussions for fires implemented into the city until around 1894. Yeah. Now, when the fire of 79 had burnt down Mr. Adams' business and he decided to stay, he actually rebuilt it so quickly in 1 year that he was the only grocery store standing in our town. Yeah.
Rebuilt it in a year.
Yeah. Now, a year after he did rebuild his business, though, that is when he would marry his first wife, Alice Byrne. These two outmost photos on the dresser over here today, those are their original wedding photos from 1881. And this Bible right here, that's the family Bible they received on that day as well.
Is that right?
Yeah. Now, in 1890, when the trains had arrived here in Deadwood, Mr. Adams had bought his older brother from their business, and he then turned it into a wholesale grocery operation. That's really where he made a lot of his money from. 30 years later, in 1920, that is when he bought this home from Nathan Franklin, and that's also where we kind of left off in our story. Now, even though Mr. Adams did have a family together with his wife in Deadwood, the really weird thing about his two daughters, though, is that neither of them had stepped a single foot inside of this home once. At all. The first reason why was actually because of the oldest, Lucille, right over here in the hat. Now, in 1911, Lucille was married to this guy named Frank. And Frank had taken a job out in Detroit working on the early car lines there. In April of 1911, he had moved out there just to kind of get everything situated for the couple. Now, when she, though, had moved out there in September of that year, that is also when she found out that she had contracted typhoid fever here in Deadwood. And she passed away a few weeks later from it at the age of 28 without any kids to her name. Now, as for the youngest, though, Helen, in 1918, her husband had moved her out to Pasadena, California. And in all honesty, she just really never made a trip back here. In 1925, though, that is when she had announced to her family that she was expecting her first child out in California. And that had also been kind of a big deal for the Adams. Didn't really have any grandkids yet.
Right.
However, at the same time of this announcement, his wife Alice was going through her final stages in cancer. Now, even though she was in a pretty weak state due to the cancer, she had actually managed to trip all the way out to California to be with her daughter during this pregnancy.
Wow.
But the same day that she had arrived there, also the same day she passed away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did she get... Oh, she hadn't had the baby yet.
No.
Oh.
She was actually 5 months into her pregnancy.
Oh.
But the death of her mother was so heartbreaking to her, it made her go into premature labor. And with it being 1925, the doctors were unable to save her baby or just even her.
Oh my gosh.
So in a span of 2 days, 48 hours, Mr. Adams had lost his wife, his daughter, and his granddaughter.
Wow. Tragic.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Adams came back to this house all by himself after those 3 separate funerals in California. And not only was that sadness felt here inside of our home, but throughout the entire city of Deadwood as well. everyone in our town had a connection to that family one way or another.
Oh yeah.
So it really hit our community hard.
So were the funerals? But were they brought back here for funerals?
No, actually, still to this day, they're buried out in Pasadena, California.
Okay.
When Mr. Adams passed away, he wasn't buried up at Mount Moriah. He was actually buried out in California with them.
Okay.
Now, 2 years later, though, in 1927, Mr. Adams would begin to find happiness again. And it was actually in a woman who was a lot younger than he was. Kind of weird how that works out, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about her and her contribution in the next room across the hallway.
Now, is that the fixture that was down below?
Yep, that actually used to be the original chandelier for the sitting room right below us.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. You can follow me over here next. All right. So this room right here, this is Mary's bedroom, and Mary was Mr. Adams' second wife. Now, when she had moved inside of this home in 1927, this room actually wasn't supposed to be a bedroom, a part of the home. This was the upper sitting room for the master bedroom right over there. However, when she did move inside of this house, she liked the round design and the fireplace in it so much that she had added these drapes, which actually are still original to her time, inside of the house. She'd added those French doors right there for privacy. She had also implemented that family heirloom of hers, that big old green vase.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty.
Oh yeah, that's actually an original piece locally done here in the Deadwood.
Yeah. Has an oriental look to it.
Yeah, so here in Deadwood during our early days of town, we had a very heavily Chinese immigrant population, just like basically any other mining town.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of them did decide to stay. And Mary, her mother, was a Romanian immigrant who connected well with the other immigrants in town. So she did have a lot of close family friends who were part of the Asian community here. Now that right there is actually one of the two houses that Mr. Adams had owned out in California. That house right there specifically though, that's actually today on the street that the Parade of Roses is on in Pasadena.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, was she Catholic or see the crucifix?
She was. Now, Mary was actually a widow herself by the time she met Mr. Adams. She lost her first husband due to influenza here during the pandemic of our country. When that gentleman had died, Mary moved out to California where she became a teacher at a private Catholic school.
Nice.
And also out there in California, though, is where the two had met. They actually met on a train one day coming back from Los Angeles to Deadwood. Now, when Mary arrived on the train that day, she noticed that W. East Butler was sitting in her spot. Guy refused to give up the spot. Let's just say before she did take a seat, she made quite the scene about that. However, feeling bad about that entire situation, Mr. Adams came to apologize. And that's when the two had struck up a conversation the entire ride back to this town. Now, when they did arrive here in Deadwood, Mr. Adams had asked her out on a date. She accepted, and the rest is history. Yeah. Now, they obviously were an odd couple, though, for a few reasons. The first, though, was actually their religions. Like I had just said, Mary was a life-devoted Catholic, and Mr. Adams, he was Episcopalian.
Oh.
Now, obviously, in today's day, that might not be a big deal, but in the 1920s, it was still fairly uncommon to have an interreligion marriage.
Yeah.
This had also, though, kind of been like a lady and a tramp situation, but reversed. And we say this because Mr. Adams was the richest man in our state, and Mary had actually been from a pretty poor working-class family in the town over of Lee. Now, the biggest, though, and probably the most obvious reason of why they were such an odd couple was that age gap.
Mm-hmm.
When they got married, Mr. Adams was at the ripe young age of just 73.
Really?
Yeah, and Mary, she was 29 years old.
That's an age gap.
Yeah, 44 years. Now, you know, I did say that they would have marriage here in this house for 7 years, and that was until 1934. Now, in 1934, Mr. Adams had suffered from a stroke, and he passed away 9 days later from it at the age of 80 in that room that we were just standing in.
Hello, folks. Cheers. Marty and Burndex 4. Wally here, just outside of Devil's Tower. Don't really like the name, but hey, kind of fitting for tonight with the smoke in the air, and but it's made for some nice sunset pictures. The smoky smoke in the air, must be a wildfire or something somewhere. But we're just gonna kick back here, enjoy the evening. No hookups here, 25 bucks. Saturday evening, and probably spend tomorrow in the park. Should be fun. Sit back here and enjoy the nice scenery. Nice evening. No mosquitoes. Just a perfect, quiet evening. Beautiful.